Mass shootings in the U.S., full list, and where the killers are now. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Today, we break down America's most haunting mass shootings and where the killers are now. These aren't just events. They're names, timelines, and a nation still bleeding from every bullet. Number 1. Robert Eugene Crimo III. He packed 83 rounds, dressed in disguise, and climbed a rooftop ladder to rain bullets on a holiday crowd, turning a 4th of July parade into a scene of devastation. Robert Eugene Bobby Crimo III, aged 21, carried out a meticulously planned assault on the Highland Park 4th of July parade in Illinois on July 4, 2022. At precisely 10:14 a.m., he positioned himself atop a rooftop overlooking the crowded streets and unleashed a hail of bullets from a Smith & Wesson M&P15 rifle. He fired at least 83 rounds, killing 7, among them 88-year-old Stephen Strauss and 64-year-old Catherine Goldstein, and wounding 48 others, including 8-year-old Cooper Roberts, who was left paralyzed. Investigators revealed chilling details of preparation. Crimo used an unsecured ladder to reach the roof, emptied 2 magazines, quickly loaded another, and then blended into the chaos disguised in women's clothing and makeup. Police recovered his rifle within minutes, and by 6:30 p.m., Crimo had been arrested 8 hours later in Lake Forest, unarmed and wearing jeans and a hoodie. Prosecutors characterized the attack as calculated and heinous, saying Crimo intended to shatter public joy. His digital footprint confirmed weeks of planning, violent music videos, drawings of shooters, and far-right, nihilistic posts glorifying mass violence. His history included a 2019 suicide attempt with a machete and threats to kill his entire household. Despite that, his father obtained a firearm owner's ID for him and purchased weapons legally. In March 2025, Crimo pleaded guilty to 69 counts, 21 first-degree murders, and 48 attempted murders, resulting in 7 consecutive life sentences plus 2,400 years behind bars. Judge Victoria Rossetti labeled him irretrievably depraved. Family members confronted his empty chair. Leah Sundheim, daughter of one victim, said, "I hope you wake in the middle of the night, gasping for air you don't deserve." The atrocity ignited significant legal changes. In January 2023, Illinois enacted a statewide ban on assault weapons, expanding on Highland Park's local ordinance. Crimo's father was convicted for reckless conduct in enabling his access to firearms, and lawsuits ensued against both him, the gun manufacturer, and local authorities. Now imprisoned at Stateville Correctional Center, Crimo's actions have become part of America's darkest modern history, a reminder that even a day meant for unity can be savagely repurposed into a moment of horror. And yet, amid the sorrow and legal reckonings, one question hangs heavy: how many red flags must wave before someone steps in? That leads us to what we must learn. Repeated threats, suicide attempts, and violent online behavior should trigger legal blocks on firearm access. Every red flag ignored was a warning unheeded. Public events require more than crowd control. Securing rooftops, ladders, and elevated vantage points must be standard protocol. Parents enabling weapon access for unstable individuals must face legal accountability. A day meant for joyful fireworks became a stain in American history. What we do next is our true measure of progress. Number 2. Salvador Ramos. He didn't sneak in or shout threats. He just walked through an unlocked door, armed with an AR-style rifle, nearly 400 rounds, and a clear intent to kill children. On May 24, 2022, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos crashed his grandmother's pickup near Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Minutes earlier, he had shot his 66-year-old grandmother in the face. She survived and dialed 911. Ramos then messaged a girl in Germany, "I just shot my grandma. I'm going to shoot up an elementary school." At 11:31 a.m., Ramos entered the school through a propped-open back door. Within 2 minutes, he burst into classrooms 111 and 112. He told terrified children, "You're all gonna die," played somber music, and unloaded over 100 rounds. Survivors later said he smeared blood on the chalkboard and wrote LOL. Inside those rooms, 19 fourth graders were killed along with teachers Irma Garcia and Eva Mireles, who died shielding their students. 17 others were wounded. Backpacks, schoolwork, and tiny shoes lay scattered on a blood-soaked floor. One child whispered a 911 plea, but no one came in. More than 300 officers arrived. Yet for 77 minutes, they classified the situation as a barricaded subject, not an active shooter. Despite cries for help from inside, they held back. The U.S. Department of Justice later described this delay as an abject failure. At 12:50 p.m., a Border Patrol tactical agent used a janitor's key to breach the door and fatally shoot Ramos. No negotiation, no arrest, just a lifeless body among the dead children. In the aftermath, Ramos's legal gun purchases, 2 rifles and hundreds of rounds just days after turning 18, became focal points. He had posted threats online, spoke of school shootings, and admitted being bullied at Rob in 4th grade. State authorities found him fixated on notoriety. Officials were fired or indicted, including Chief Pete Arredondo. Rob Elementary was demolished. Families sued gunmakers, school officials, and social media platforms. President Biden signed the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, America's most significant gun reform in 30 years. Salvador Ramos was never tried. He never stood in court. His ashes were processed out of town, no community funeral, no public reckoning. But what remained, beyond funerals and lawsuits, was a brutal silence. And from that silence emerged a series of truths this nation can no longer afford to ignore. This builds emotional gravity while setting the stage for the lessons. Turning 18 shouldn't mean instant access to assault weapons. Waiting periods and background checks must reflect real risk. Behavioral red flags, from violent posts to direct threats, must trigger intervention, not hindsight grief. Law enforcement must act in minutes, not wait for orders. Hesitation kills. When danger announces itself and no one moves, the silence that follows is not just failure, it's complicity. Number 3, Nikolas Jacob Cruz. He didn't break in. He walked in, through the same gates where he once belonged with a rifle, a backpack of loaded magazines, and a plan to destroy Valentine's Day forever. On February 14, 2018, Nikolas Jacob Cruz, 19, entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, wearing a backpack filled with loaded magazines and carrying a legally purchased AR-15 style rifle. It was 2:19 p.m. when he arrived by Uber. Within 2 minutes, he was inside Building 12. And within 6 minutes, 17 people were dead. 14 students. 3 staff members. Another 17 were wounded. Cruz moved methodically from floor to floor, reloading, firing into classrooms, and returning to shoot those already down. Prosecutors called it heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Victims had once sat beside him in class. Samantha Fuentes, shot and scarred, recalled seeing her friends murdered. Lori Alhadeff touched her daughter Alyssa's body, shot 10 times. Joaquin Oliver's father said his son's head was held together by the skin of his scalp. Cruz fled by blending into the chaos, ditching his rifle and backpack before leaving with other students. He stopped at Subway for a drink, lingered at McDonald's, and was arrested 90 minutes later without resistance. The shooting shocked the country, not only for its brutality but for its predictability. Cruz had posted online about wanting to be a school shooter. He mutilated himself on social media. Police had visited him dozens of times. He was expelled, banned, investigated, and still legally bought the murder weapon. In 2021, Cruz pleaded guilty to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. Prosecutors sought the death penalty, citing premeditation and cruelty. The defense argued fetal alcohol syndrome and mental illness. Ultimately, 3 jurors opposed execution. Cruz received 34 life sentences without parole. The reaction was fury. Alyssa's father, Ilan Alhadeff, called the sentence an insult to justice. Joaquin's father, Manuel Oliver, said, "You're going to die before me, and I will celebrate it." Survivor Sam Fuentes told Cruz, "You are not special. You are nobody." The Parkland massacre sparked a movement, March for Our Lives, and triggered legal changes. Florida passed new school safety laws and changed its requirement for unanimous jury votes in capital cases, directly because of Cruz. He now serves 34 life terms in a Florida prison. His name is hidden from headlines, but the wounds he left are permanent. And with those wounds come 3 unshakable lessons. When someone signals violence repeatedly, online, at school, to police, it demands immediate, coordinated intervention. Gun laws failed catastrophically. Cruz legally bought a weapon despite being a known threat. Warning signs are not warnings if no one takes responsibility. This wasn't a surprise attack. It was a documented dissent ignored by too many, and it cost 17 lives that could have been spared. Number 4, Connor James Sturgeon. He live-streamed his workplace massacre in broad daylight. No disguise, no remorse, just a rifle, a camera, and a plan to kill. On April 10, 2023, 25-year-old Connor James Sturgeon walked into Old National Bank in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. It was 8:15 a.m. A newly hired employee, Sturgeon brought with him a gym bag containing an AR-15 style rifle and 3 loaded magazines. He set up his phone in the corner of his office, pressed record, and started live streaming. Seconds later, he stepped into the hallway, turned to a coworker, and said, "It's time to go." Then he opened fire. He shot one woman in the leg before storming into a staff meeting. 13 people were present, some in person, some on Zoom. In 23 seconds, Sturgeon fired over 24 rounds. 5 people were killed, including senior managers and community leaders. 8 more were injured. Then he waited. For 4 full minutes, he paced the lobby in silence until police arrived. At 8:40 a.m., he fired at patrol cars, wounding civilians and rookie officer Nikolas, who was shot in the head. His partner, Officer Corey Galloway, returned fire and fatally shot Sturgeon by 8:44 a.m. Those killed were Josh Barrick, Deanna Eckert, Tommy Elliott, Juliana Farmer, and Jim Tutt, all bank employees. Officer Wilt survived after emergency brain surgery. The investigation revealed the attack had been premeditated. Sturgeon left a note expressing frustration over gun access and wrote, "They won't listen to words or protests. Let's see if they hear this." He had texted friends days earlier saying he was suicidal and planned to kill as many people in the bank as I can. His mother had tried to get him psychiatric help. Just days before the attack, she scheduled an evaluation. Yet Sturgeon legally purchased the AR-15 only 6 days prior. Under Kentucky law, the weapon used in the shooting would be returned to the market through auction. Louisville's mayor called it insanity. There was no trial, no cross-examination, no formal justice. But there was fallout. President Biden, Governor Beshear, and gun safety advocates pointed to the case as a national failure. Once again, mental illness, clear warnings, and easy gun access collided fatally. What happened in Louisville didn't just take 3 lives, it exposed 5 glaring truths we can't afford to ignore. Suicidal ideation paired with violent intent must trigger immediate intervention. Sturgeon warned multiple people in advance, but no one acted. Mental health delays can be deadly. Timely psychiatric response isn't optional, it's life-saving. Legal gun access in moments of crisis is policy malpractice. He bought the rifle days after voicing homicidal thoughts. The shooting ended in minutes. The aftermath will last for years. This tragedy wasn't silent. It was announced, ignored, and then broadcast live for all to witness. Number 5, Anderson Lee Aldrich. He didn't come from the shadows. He came in full armor, under flashing lights, with a rifle ready. On November 19, 2022, just before midnight, Anderson Lee Aldrich entered Club Q in Colorado Springs, armed with an AR-15 style assault rifle and wearing tactical body armor. The venue, a safe haven for the LGBTQ+ community, was celebrating Transgender Day of Remembrance. Seconds later, chaos erupted. Aldrich opened fire at the entrance, the bar, and across the dance floor. 5 people were killed. 19 more were shot. Among the dead were 28-year-old bartender Daniel Aston and 35-year-old mother Ashley Paw. But the massacre was cut short, not by police, but by patrons. Army veteran Richard Fierro sprang into action. He tackled Aldrich to the ground, disarmed him, and used the shooter's own pistol to deliver blow after blow. Navy Petty Officer Thomas James and a transgender woman, Dree Norman, helped pin Aldrich down until officers arrived. Their bravery likely saved dozens more. The aftermath revealed premeditated hate. The FBI discovered Aldrich had surveilled Club Q days before the attack. Inside the shooter's home were maps, rainbow-colored bullseye targets, a binder titled How to Handle an Active Shooter, and digital traces of neo-fascist and anti-LGBTQ+ ideology. Prosecutors labeled it a bias-motivated, premeditated act of domestic terror. Even more chilling was Aldrich's past. In 2021, he held his grandparents hostage, threatened to become the next mass killer, and live-streamed a standoff with police. Yet no charges were filed. No red flag laws were triggered. Despite the threats, Aldrich later purchased firearms legally assisted by their father. In court, defense attorneys argued Aldrich suffered from mental illness and childhood trauma. But prosecutors said the plan, the execution, and the target were all deliberate. In 2023, Aldrich pleaded guilty to 69 state charges, including 5 counts of murder and 46 counts of attempted murder. The sentence, 5 life terms without parole plus 2,211 years. In 2024, Aldrich pleaded guilty to 74 federal charges, including 50 hate crimes, resulting in 55 additional life sentences and 190 years in federal prison. For survivors like Ashton Gamblin, who was shot 9 times and left with permanent injuries, the pain is unending. "I hope prison breaks your spirit," she said, "because you stole mine." Today, Aldrich remains imprisoned at Coleman Medium Federal Correctional Complex in Florida. The courtroom has gone silent, but the warnings this case sends are deafening. Clear threats must be acted upon. Aldrich openly declared violent intent and was still ignored. Red flag laws are only effective when enforced. Warning signs without legal action are just missed chances. Hate-fueled violence is rarely spontaneous. Aldrich planned, posted, and prepared. This wasn't a sudden outburst, it was a preventable massacre. When known threats slip through, the cost is measured in lives, not headlines. Number 6, Natalie Rupnow. She studied the layout like a tactician, labeled the rooms, and timed every step of her plan. At 11:30 a.m., she would begin what she called ready for death. Natalie Lynn Samantha Rupnow was only 15 years old. On December 16, 2024, she walked into Abundant Life Christian School in DeForest, Wisconsin, wearing a hoodie and carrying a Glock 19. Without speaking, she opened fire inside the building. Her targets weren't random. They were everyone. By 11:05 a.m., the horror was over. She had taken her own life. 2 people lay dead, teacher Aaron West, 42, and student Ruby Vergara, 14. 6 others were wounded. Investigators recovered 21 shell casings and multiple loaded magazines. But the most disturbing discoveries came from her home, a cardboard replica of the school, detailed maps, and writings titled War Against Humanity. In them, she praised the Columbine shooters, called humanity filth, and declared she was ready to be next. Natalie's spiral began years earlier. She had been in therapy since 2022 for suicidal ideation and self-harm. Her home life was described as unstable, parents who divorced and remarried twice, and a father she described as verbally abusive. In August 2024, she joined a gun club with her father, Jeffrey Rupnow, who admitted giving her unsupervised access to his gun safe. He now faces felony charges for providing a firearm to a minor and contributing to her delinquency. Online, Natalie's posts glorified mass shootings and white supremacist symbols. She posted a white power hand sign just hours before the attack. Investigators say her ideology and isolation fueled her path to violence. This was Wisconsin's 8th mass shooting of the year, the 487th in the U.S. in 2024. But Natalie's case stood out. Fewer than 3% of mass shooters are female. The public reaction was swift. President Biden called the attack shocking and unconscionable, and Wisconsin's governor ordered flags at half-staff. A parent of one survivor asked plainly, "When are we going to stop doing that?" Natalie left no manifesto. Just a timeline, a countdown, and an aftermath of grief that no courtroom could resolve. We talk about school shootings and statistics. But here, we met the face of a child. And that makes the silence surrounding her descent even more deafening. Her story didn't end with gunfire, it began long before. And that's where the first lesson begins. Mental health warnings, especially in minors, must trigger real intervention, not just paperwork. Firearm access at home must be restricted and supervised. A parent's negligence can become a child's weapon. Online behavior matters. Praise of mass shooters or hate symbols isn't free speech, it's a flashing red light. When tragedy walks in through the front door with a student's face, our only defense is what we chose to see or ignored before it got that far. Number 7, Jaylen Dwayne Edgar. The streets thrummed with Halloween energy until one unforgettable bullet shattered it all, turning celebration into crisis in an instant. Jaylen Dwayne Edgar, just 17, stepped calmly through Orlando's downtown crowd on November 1, 2024, and opened fire. His first shot hit 25-year-old Tyreek Hill, killing him instantly. Moments later, 19-year-old college student Timothy Schmidt Jr. was mortally wounded, and 8 others were injured in the chaos. Panic ensued as people fled in fear and confusion. While officers were already on the scene, surveillance captured Edgar walking past them before firing again into the crowd. Orlando Police Chief Eric Smith observed, whatever his mindset was, he was going to shoot no matter what. 9 shell casings were found at the second location on Washington Street and Orange Avenue. Within seconds, responding officers tackled Edgar and disarmed him. He surrendered without resistance and was taken into custody, initially held in juvenile detention before being transferred to adult court. He now faces 2 counts of second-degree murder with a firearm and 6 counts of attempted first-degree murder. His unrelated 2023 grand theft charge has also been elevated to adult court. Edgar offered no clear motive. He told police he was under stress and had seen a lot of loved ones die. Authorities suspect the shooting may have been tied to personal conflicts, though none of his victims were known to him. The randomness of the attack, targeting a holiday crowd, made it even more chilling. In response, Mayor Buddy Dyer declared a state of emergency, imposed a 1 a.m. curfew, and halted alcohol sales after midnight. These measures reignited debates over downtown security and awareness of Florida's concealed carry law, which restricts police powers to screen for weapons. Families of the deceased have filed lawsuits against the city and law enforcement, alleging inadequate planning and safety protocols. Tyreek Hill's mother described the loss as the worst thing ever, while Timothy Schmidt Jr.'s father demanded change and asked, "Why is it still not safe on our city streets?" Edgar has made no mental health claim and offered no defense. His trial is scheduled for March 10, 2025, and he remains in Orange County Jail, awaiting proceedings that could redefine how juvenile mass shooters are prosecuted. This wasn't just one teenager's act. It exposed deep vulnerabilities in public safety, mental health care, youth accountability, and event management. And it left the community grappling with urgent questions about prevention and responsibility. That night revealed serious cracks, and it demands more than mourning. It calls for action. Youth trauma and unaddressed grief can quietly build into violence. Early intervention is critical. Visible police presence is not enough. Proactive crowd screening and behavioral detection are essential during major public events. Teen access to firearms remains a deadly loophole. Without stricter enforcement and family accountability, guns will keep finding young hands. 1 teen, 1 weapon, and 1 missed warning turned Halloween into horror. The next tragedy is preventable if we act. Number 8. Francisco Oropeza. He didn't fuse into the background. He barged into their lives with a rifle and rage, turning a quiet Texas street into a scene of horror. On April 28, 2023, in a small neighborhood in Cleveland, Texas, 38-year-old Francisco Oropeza became a household name for all the wrong reasons. Earlier that evening, neighbors had politely asked him to stop firing his AR-style rifle. There was a baby sleeping. His response, "I'll do what I want." Minutes later, he stormed into their home. What followed was a massacre. 5 people, family members, workers, parents, were gunned down inside their own house. Among the dead were 9-year-old Daniel Enrique Lazo Guzman and his mother, 25-year-old Sonia Guzman. The other victims, Diana Velasquez, Obdulia Rivera, and Josue Casares, died trying to shield others. 4 more were injured. Oropeza fled. For 4 tense days, more than 250 officers, drones, and dogs combed the region. On May 2nd, police found him hiding beneath laundry in a friend's closet. His domestic partner and another man were arrested for helping him evade capture. At first, Oropeza pleaded not guilty. But after prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, he reversed course. On January 29, 2025, he pleaded guilty to capital murder and was sentenced to life without parole. He would, in the DA's words, remain in custody until he breathes his last breath. The motive? Some claimed lingering resentment between the families, alleging the victim's dog once killed his chickens. But what ignited that night was rage without warning, and the willingness to act on it with deadly force. Witnesses described him as cold, calculated, and remorseless. One survivor recalled Oropeza shooting his wife first on the doorstep. There was no negotiation, no hesitation, only gunfire. The victims' families, all of Honduran origin, chose to avoid a death penalty trial to prevent re-traumatization. In emotional Spanish-language meetings with prosecutors, they said they wanted justice but not a process that would drag on for years. Oropeza will die in prison. After the massacre, Governor Greg Abbott faced backlash for labeling the victims illegal immigrants. He later apologized, but the damage was done. The shooting reignited national debate about guns, hate, and what it means to feel safe in your own home, even as Texas lawmakers refused to consider new firearm restrictions. Oropeza now sits behind bars. But the road he walked, from backyard gunfire to neighbor extermination, leaves behind 3 brutal reminders. Simple neighbor disputes can explode into lethal violence when firearms are involved. Respect and de-escalation must be the norm. Prior arrests mean little without enforcement. Oropeza slipped through a system that never stopped his access to deadly weapons. When justice avoids the courtroom, stories go untold. Survivors chose peace over pain, but the silence leaves warning signs unheard. When a man answers a noise complaint with murder, and a trial ends before it starts, we're left asking not just how but why it keeps happening. And who's really safe when the next house over is armed and angry? Number 9. Stephen Craig Paddock. He didn't storm the stage or shout demands. From behind a sealed hotel suite window, he engineered a mass casualty event using tripods, optics, and loopholes in U.S. gun law on live American soil. On October 1, 2017, 64-year-old Stephen Craig Paddock checked into a suite on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas. Over 6 days, he smuggled in 23 rifles, many modified with bump stocks that mimicked full auto fire. He brought thousands of rounds, high-capacity magazines, and surveillance cameras trained on the hallway. From his window, he had a sniper's view of the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival, 22,000 people spread across the concert grounds below. At 10:05 p.m., Paddock smashed 2 windows with a hammer and opened fire with rapid bursts. In seconds, celebration turned to chaos. Within 10 minutes, he had fired more than 1,000 rounds. A hotel security guard, Jesus Campos, was wounded as he responded to an unrelated incident. SWAT breached the suite at 11:20 p.m. Paddock was found dead by self-inflicted gunshot, surrounded by shell casings, scopes, and shattered glass, the suite now etched into America's memory. He never spoke. He never faced a courtroom. Just silence and 60 lives erased. 58 people died that night. 2 more succumbed later. Over 850 were injured, not all by gunfire, many from trampling and debris. Victims ranged from teenagers to retirees, from off-duty officers to mothers sheltering children. No manifesto. No note. Investigators discovered trajectory calculations, 50 pounds of explosives in his car, 1,600 additional rounds, and disturbing material on his hard drive. But no ideology, no accomplice, no clear motive. The FBI speculated he was driven by a desire for infamy, perhaps fueled by financial loss and emotional decline in the gambling world. His medical records showed anxiety, depression, obsessive behavior with no notable brain abnormalities found post-mortem. The aftermath sparked lawsuits against MGM Resorts, Mandalay Bay, and bump stock manufacturers. In 2018, President Trump banned bump stocks, only for the Supreme Court to reverse the ban in 2024, igniting fresh national outrage. Some called Las Vegas a turning point, but others asked the painful question, if the deadliest shooting in modern U.S. history didn't prompt lasting change, what will? Stephen Paddock vanished behind that locked door, armed, isolated, and silent, only to emerge in death, leaving a wound on the national conscience. Stephen Paddock is gone, but the echoes of that night still ring in broken laws, and broken bodies, and in the broken faith of those left behind. When silence from the shooter becomes louder than action from the system, it leaves us with one haunting question: how many more must die before we act? And from this tragedy, 3 urgent warnings emerge. Modifying legal rifles into automatic-style weapons exposes fatal loopholes. Bump stocks turn tragedy into a war zone. Mass shooters don't always declare motives. Absence of ideology doesn't equal absence of threat. Surveillance without regulation is reactive, not preventive. Laws must lead. When the deadliest shooting in U.S. history fails to move lawmakers, it's no longer a policy gap, it's national complicity. Number 10, Anthony Dwayne McRae. He didn't run in. He walked with 2 handguns, 11 magazines, and 136 rounds of ammunition. On February 13, 2023, 43-year-old Anthony Dwayne McRae arrived at Michigan State University by bus. At 7:24 p.m., he entered Berkey Hall and opened fire inside room 114, where students were attending an evening class. Juniors Ariel Anderson and Alexandria Werner were killed instantly. 5 others were critically wounded, including 2 students from China and 1 from Florida. Yukai Hao survived, but would never walk again. At 8:18 p.m., the first 911 call came in. Campus police sent out an alert: run, hide, fight. Students jumped from windows. Some barricaded doors. But McRae wasn't done. He exited Berkey, fired outside the Human Ecology building, then walked into the MSU Union. There, he shot sophomore Brian Fraser point blank. The shooter fled. A manhunt stretched into the night. By 10:04 p.m., authorities had released surveillance images. Just after 11:30 p.m., a local resident recognized him. Police found McRae slumped against a wall in Lansing. The gun used to end his own life lay nearby. He left behind a note: threats against MSU, New Jersey schools, and several businesses. The shooting was premeditated. Yet McRae had been able to buy those handguns legally in 202 despite a felony weapons charge from 2019. His father later said McRae had never recovered after his mother's death. He didn't care about anything anymore, he told investigators. Police never found a clear motive. The human cost was enormous. The families of the 3 murdered students received $5 million settlements. The survivors, some now paralyzed, some unable to speak, face lifelong trauma and staggering medical costs. One mother said her son went from studying engineering to needing help brushing his teeth. Governor Gretchen Whitmer addressed the state: the time for only thoughts and prayers is over. Within weeks, Michigan lawmakers introduced bills for universal background checks, red flag laws, and safe gun storage. MSU launched the Spartan Strong Fund and began planning a memorial. There would be no trial, no cross-examination, no sentencing. But the silence left in McRae's wake screamed a truth we can no longer ignore. Because when students study in fear and parents text during gunfire, the question isn't what went wrong, it's why nothing changed before it did. And so the MSU massacre leaves 3 brutal warnings. Legal loopholes kept McRae armed. Dropped charges shouldn't restore full access to deadly weapons. Mental health decline and isolation is a public risk, not just a private struggle. Intervention must follow visible warning signs. Lockdowns aren't prevention. By the time alerts went out, lives were already lost. When red flags are known and ignored, the next tragedy isn't a question, it's a countdown. America wasn't ready, and the next campus won't be either. They planned, they armed, they killed, and left America with another grave to dig and another list to mourn. From teenagers with manifestos to veterans with rifles, these are not just names. They're warnings. But behind every courtroom sentence and coroner's report, one question echoes louder: what did we miss before the first shot? If these stories hit you like they hit us, don't scroll away. Subscribe to Justice Reversed and turn on the bell. We dig deeper, speak louder, and bring you the real crimes they don't want you to remember. Because the next case? It's already happening.